Okay. I'll show you. Got my lunch today. Very excited to be working earlier in the day. And then, of course, I'm sporting Georgie's shirt. Woof, woof, bark, bark. Uh, I didn't want to wait till tonight. There's a video out there right now from C-SPAN from some congressional testimony that I think is just absolutely stunning from a whistleblower who just resigned from DHS and ICE duty as he's a lawyer. I'm gonna ask you guys to stay with me today for 6 minutes of his video because it's the most important 6 videos you're going to see about ICE so far this year. And then we're going to come back and talk about it real quick. And then I'll tell you about the Substacks we have going, podcasts. We have one both for Wednesday night and one for Thursday night with different folks. But let me just get this booted up here and hang with me, okay? Please, this is really important and really terrifying.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, Representative Garcia, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Schwank. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution when I joined ICE on August 1st, 2021, as an Assistant Chief Counsel. I followed that oath for 4.5 years, working side by side with ICE officers. And I followed it when I resigned on February 13th, 2026, a little over a week ago, so that I could speak to you today. I am here because I am duty-bound to report the legally required training program at the ICE is deficient, defective, and broken. 5 months ago, I was asked to teach the law to new cadets at the ICE Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, where ICE is training its new, inexperienced recruits. I volunteered, those without law enforcement training, I volunteered to take on this assignment based on my experience in law enforcement oversight. For the last 5 months, I watched ICE dismantle the training program, cutting 240 hours of vital classes from a 584-hour program. Classes that teach the Constitution, our legal system, firearms training, the use of force, lawful arrests, proper detention, and the limits of officers' authority. For example, they ceased all of the legal instructions regarding use of force. This means that cadets are not taught what it means to be objectively reasonable, the very standard which the law requires them to meet when deciding whether or not to use deadly force. Our jobs as instructors are to teach them so well that they can make split-second decisions about what they can and cannot do in life or death situations. Yet, in the name of churning out an endless stream of officers, DHS leadership has dismantled the academic and practical tests that we need to know if cadets can safely and lawfully perform their job. All to satisfy an administration demanding they train thousands of new officers before the end of the year. DHS told the public that new cadets receive all the training they need to perform their duties, that no critical material or standards have been cut. This is a lie. ICE made the program shorter, and they removed so many essential parts that what remains is a dangerous husk. No reasonable person would believe a training program suddenly cut nearly in half could meet the minimum legal requirements. These aren't abstract rules. They're required in regulations such as 8 CFR 287G1. Congress requires immigration officers to meet minimum standards for a reason. ICE cannot lawfully perform their duties, make arrests, carry weapons, and use force without passing appropriate training. New cadets are graduating from the academy despite widespread concerns among training staff that even in the final days of training, the cadets cannot demonstrate a solid grasp of the tactics or the law required to perform their jobs. Without reform, ICE will graduate thousands of new officers who do not know their constitutional duty, do not know the limits of their authority, and who do not have the training to recognize an unlawful order. That should scare everyone. DHS assures the public these cadets can get the job training on compensate for anything missing at the academy. This is a lie. Many graduates go to their home office just long enough to get their gun, their badge, and their body armor before deploying to places like Minneapolis and other ICE operations with minimal supervision. It's shocking that anyone would think this is safe or responsible. And this pattern of lies is not isolated. It extends beyond the training program to include deceiving Congress and the public about the rules followed by ICE officers once they graduate. On my first day at the academy, I was instructed to read and return a memo in my supervisor's presence, which claimed ICE officers could enter homes without a judicial warrant. The acting ICE director authorized the very conduct that DHS, in its own 2025 legal training materials, had called the chief evil against which the wording of the Fourth Amendment is directed. That is, physical entry of the home without consent or a proper warrant. Never in my career had I ever received such a blatantly unlawful order, nor one conveyed in such a troubling manner. Incredibly, I was being shown this memo in secret by my supervisor, who made sure that I understood that disobedience could cost me my job. ICE is teaching cadets to violate the Constitution, and they were attempting to cloak it in secrecy by demanding that I lie about it. I am here to convey to the public the danger that is being created at the ICE Academy. I know from my conversations with many facility members, many of the faculty, that I am not alone in my fear. Law enforcement is a deadly serious business. It is not a place for shortcuts. Deficient training can and will get people killed. It can and will lead to unlawful arrests, violations of constitutional rights, and a fundamental loss of public trust in law enforcement. ICE is lying to Congress and the American people about the steps it is taking to ensure its 12,000 new officers faithfully uphold the Constitution and can perform their jobs. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today and happy to answer any questions you have now or in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Wow. Stunning. And I saw this last night, and I was going to do something on it even this morning, but I had some cabin stuff to do at Virginia Backcountry Cabins that took precedent. But I mean, let's just think about this. Here's a guy who's a lawyer, right? This is not just a trainer. This is a lawyer for the US government telling us, I mean, there's so many highlights here that you can't pick one or three or five out. Everything that came out of his mouth, everything was a terrifying highlight, you know, from, geez, this is for the training for people who don't have law enforcement backgrounds. So they don't know. They're not trained on Constitution law, that stuff. They're going through the program. They're supposed to have 500 plus hours of training. And they're getting less than half of that, approximately half of that. Dismantling the training program. They're not getting the legal standard on the use of force and deadly force. Can you imagine guys who don't know anything about law enforcement just giving them a gun? And this is what we've been seeing. It's what we've been saying all along. Remember, Minnesota, Los Angeles, Chicago, these guys don't appear to be well trained, a lot of them, and some of them are because they have law enforcement backgrounds, but they've been given the same instructions as to what they can and can't do. DHS dismantled practical tests and telling Congress that they're meeting a certain standard. And this lawyer who worked for ICE up until a week ago testified under oath that this is an exact quote, "This is a lie." And that no reasonable person would believe a training program that's cut in half would be effective at training these guys to do the work that they're doing. Their use of force training, the lack of it, is mandated by Congress, and that they can't pass these requirements even at the end of their training cycle. Most of these guys can't pass these simple training requirements. He says this, remember, quote, this is a lawyer. This is a lawyer who was in charge of helping train these people for 5 months. He said, this should scare anyone. Then when he first went to work there, he had to sign a form essentially telling them how they could go into people's homes without judicial warrants, which is against the law and against the Fourth Amendment. That they just determined that it's okay. And for him not to be teaching them that, which would put them at risk and liability, he has to teach them that that's okay, which puts the liability on him. He would be breaking the law. So that you can see why he's out. He's like, no. Remember Nuremberg, obeying an illegal order doesn't prevent you from being charged with a crime because the order was illegal. This is what Mark Kelly was talking about with the U.S. military. Somebody gives you an illegal order, you are not to follow it, because if you do, it puts you at risk. This is why these Congress people were saying that. This is the exact reason why they were saying that. Except they were talking to the U.S. military and their oath to the Constitution and following the Uniform Code of Military Justice, often referred to as UCMJ. This guy has a different standard because he's teaching civilians to become law enforcement officers and giving these 500 hours of training wrapped into 200 now. And that, this was all cloaked in secrecy. His supervisor made him sit there, read the form, and sign it. And the onus was on him alone to violate the rule of law and the Constitution. He said ICE is lying to Congress about steps it's taking to make sure they uphold the law and the Constitution. This is frightening. Remember, we talked a lot about earlier in some of my other Substack posts that he is trying to create his own private army of people who will follow his orders and not the law. We're talking about Donald Trump here. Kristi Noem is all in on this and happy to do it. Tom Homan, Mr. Border Czar, he's all in on this. Okay? These people are criminally liable for the stuff they're doing. And Trump will throw them all under the bus later because he has that free pass from the Supreme Court that said if he is violating the law, as long as it's for the purpose of violating the law, for the purpose of official duties, he can't be charged. But these motherfuckers can. And that's why this lawyer, who is an ethical, law-abiding, constitutionally protecting lawyer, says, no, not on my watch. You're not going to do that. And he reiterated, it's not just him. He says this is a prevalent attitude among people who are instructing that this is dangerous, of people he speaks with regularly. So this is a nightmare, okay? And it needs to be stopped, and Congress needs to take action. And I'm glad to see that when people say, oh, it's like watching C-SPAN, I'll tell you what, that's a long hearing that he was testifying in. And yeah, it's like he only gave you 6 minutes, but there was more questions to come. You can go look it up. I think it's an hour and 23 minutes, if I remember correctly. Just, wow. The boldness of these guys to think they could do whatever they want. You'll see it tonight in the State of Union. I'm not watching it. I'm not helping his ratings at all. But I will look at the highlights later, where I'm sure we already know what he's going to say, right? Biden bad. Democrats cheat on elections. U.S. hockey good. He'd be speaking like a chimpanzee in short sentences because that's his intellect is at that capacity. We need to pass the SAVE Act. Who wouldn't want people to have a voter ID? Well, people who can't afford to go get their birth certificate or don't know how to go about doing it, right? Or people who don't have a passport, which costs $100 and something plus to expedite it because you got to expedite it now because the election's coming up. You can't just wait. Elon Musk passing out fake ballots and stuff. I mean, these people are the ones cheating, right? But this is what he'll talk about tonight. He'll try to make it seem like nobody wants safe elections. Democrats want to cheat. Never happened before this guy was in office. Nobody questioned our election integrity. Nobody question U.S. election integrity until Donald Trump came along and started repeating his lies. You repeat, and then eventually it becomes a conspiracy. And eventually you throw a couple nuggets in there, and people think you're. Listen, the studies all say less than 1% of people who are undocumented immigrants vote illegally. Less than 1%. It's closer to like 0 than it is actually 1%. But you have to say 1%. And that's when you think about the numbers, it's a very, very small number. And all the studies say that. All the studies, even the Heritage Foundation found studies that suggested the numbers were small. And they're the ones pushing Project 2025 and all the shit this White House is doing. Their own numbers said that. So anyways, this guy's raising a red flag for everybody to pay attention. The elections are important and Epstein's important. Stay focused. If Iran happens, we'll start hitting Iran hard. But these two things and everything else around it, little distractions, little tiny distractions. So I got some more work to do. I'm going to sit here. Holly made me a roast beef sandwich. Huh? What do you think? Got some research to do. Got some potato chips. Probably not good for me, but whatever. 170 calories. And some fruit. Like, follow, and share. Love to see you guys on our Substack paid subscriptions. If you can get over there to From the Writer's Cabin. And we also have a smaller, less lucrative, but helpful subscription base for $2 on From the Writer's Cabin on Facebook. If you get over there, you won't see, you're not going to still be invited to the paid Substack lives like the paid subscribers over there are, but we're trying to figure out the funding models on all these platforms that's fair for everybody, especially the ones that are paying a little bit more. Like, follow, and share, comment, and share this as much as you can, because this is really important to immigration and democracy and the rule of law. Thanks, everybody.